Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have listened to my learned colleagues, and I will say that I am grateful to them all. But before I specifically address specific representations and submissions made by my colleagues on the other side and of the independent bench, and recognize in tribute the representations and deliveries by my colleagues on this side, I just want to make some prefatory remarks, if I may. I said in my opening remarks that the process of implementing CROSS began in 2019. And I just want to spend a little time on that for the reason that what we are about here today is an important point of a development. And I use that word deliberately with a capital D, because it signals a number of things which have stages. So the first stage was a recognition by this government in 2019 that the government had inherited an existing software system, the legacy system in existence, which needed to be replaced. So in 2019, the government began a negotiation to replace the existing system, software system, which drove the Registrar General's department across the different platforms, companies, etc. This government responded to a request for financing after the negotiations of 2019. The request was made in December 2019 for the release of funds. By January of 2020, this government released the funds to purchase the new system, which we are today referring to, and I smile by way of a tease at Senator Thompson, we are referring to as CROSS. Not because it is a burden that we bear, but because it is the acronym for what is known as the Computer Registration Online System, CROS. So, having taken the decision to replace the system, negotiated it in 2019, the government purchased the system in January 2020 and began to upgrade the system in February 2020. That's when the development began. We were hit by a pandemic, the COVID pandemic, in March of 2020. And that meant that notwithstanding the fact that the suppliers of the system had committed and had actually begun to come to Trinidad and Tobago in very much the same way that Minister Bacchus has been telling us about, working with us to integrate and to develop and to implement the system. No fault of this government of which I am proud to be part. COVID was not something that was wrought upon this country by the People's National Movement. It was a pandemic. So we had to hit halt. We had to hit pause, notwithstanding which, for the period of the pandemic, the Ministry of the Attorney General, this government, continued remotely and virtually, to develop CROSS with the suppliers of the system. 2020 to 2021, testing began. Internal software covering the processing of payments, data storage of all existing companies and businesses, multimedia storage of all file documents, creation of new records, web application for users, creation of the forms, introduction of validations to ensure accuracy of information, payment portal, connection to the internal software. June 2021, the launch of the company's registry account application portal, allowing for early registration to avoid a rush of applications on the launch of CROSS. June to September 2021, presentations were delivered, commenced being delivered by the Registrar General's Department to key stakeholders, informing everyone of the new ICT solution, CROS, Computer Registration Online System. The presentations covered the overview of the system, the services to be offered, and requirements for registration of a company's registry account. System testing 2021 through to 2022. Ongoing. CRA applications being submitted. Staff training was being rolled out. Marketing and a communications plan was being developed. December 2022, the legacy system, which this government recognized in 2020 needed to be replaced, it crashed. That was not because of any deficiency on the part of this government. In point of fact, because the government had purchased a new system in 2020, the crash only lasted in limited terms for a couple months, because what we were able to do in December 2022 was to begin to roll out the new CROSS system that had been purchased 2 years before, but interrupted by the pandemic. And the hobbled, that's the word that I used in my opening remarks, the hobbled implementation of the rollout of CROSS was because CROSS required significant legislative amendments to this suite of legislation which we are talking about today. But in December 2022, we had not yet accomplished to the point of finality that suite of legislation fully amended and ready for implementation. What we were, however, able to do with the developers of the software was to get them to disengage parts of their software so that the new system could be brought in and replace the crash system, but on a more limited basis, while we built out the legislative amendments that were necessary across all of the legislation to enable us to be here today in the conversation that we are engaging. That meant, and I have said it and I'm not going to repeat it unduly, that the system was hobbled, and therefore it is easy for persons to say, well, not enough training, not enough work, not enough done, you've rolled it out before it was ready. We rolled it out as best we could, but we were ready to begin the rollout, and therefore we are here today. And in the period between the introduction of the rollout, after the crash with the new system, we went on a stakeholder outreach, communications undertaken, consultations with a number of different individuals, organizations, institutions, to get persons to begin to understand the new system. Staff training continued. The registry website, if one goes on to the Registrar General's website now on our mobile phones. You can pull down the videos that are on the website that have been in existence to help persons to understand, the average woman and man and young woman, to understand how the system works. That's what we've been doing. And we were talking to the stakeholders all the time, and we were able, therefore, to launch CROSS, as I've said in my opening remarks, on the 1st of February. We've had in place for the last 2 years an online help desk. Tickets were launched to provide a portal for issues to be lodged and resolved. Regulations have been set out. I've spoken to that. I'm not going to go back into that. Online credit card and Visa debit payments were added, not by putting your credit cards into the system, but by going to portals that were opened by the Registrar General to allow users to top up their accounts. On the 17th of October, 2023, electronic signatures were launched for all users filing their own documents in CROSS. And that was done because we were able to have introduced the regulations of which I have spoken. Mr. President, I believe that at an earlier stage, one of my colleagues spoke about the statistics. Let me give an example of the statistics. February 1st, 2023 to November 21st, 2023, here are the statistics. The number of companies formed, 2,000, and this is under the new CROSS system, which is not yet fully operational because we have to pass the legislation today to make it fully operational. 2,566 new companies formed. 201 non-profit companies incorporated. 159 non-profit organizations, 5,609 business registrations, 548 firms and partnership registrations, 11,485 annual returns, 10,650 certified copies, other post-corporation documents, example, changes of address and notices of change of address, 5,132. Business name reservations, 12,516. Company name reservations, 6,701. Number of company business files searched and downloaded through CROSS, 10,484. CROSS individual user account registrations between February the 1st and November 2023, 50,785. CROSS company user account registrations, 20,267. That is in the first trial period of an almost complete CROSS, February 1st, 2023 to 21st of November, 2023. That is our introduction of a system, and we've heard Minister Bacchus tell us, and I am going to dwell a little moment, if you will allow me, Mr. President, on Minister Bacchus in due course. If we are going to allow for the fact that what we are talking about, and Senator, all of the senators, some of them, not all, use the term quantum leap. We are talking about a quantum leap that we are poised to make. The whole of government approach. And I pay tribute to the Minister of Trade and Industry. I pay tribute to the Minister of Public Administration, my colleagues, and I particularly pay tribute in the whole of government approach to the efforts, the wisdom, the tenacity, the vision, and the hard work of Minister Bacchus. We speak happily, those of us who wish to be prophets of doom and gloom, about the TSTT cyber crash, because it is the latest, most current piece of bad news that can be purveyed. What we don't speak about, because it's good news, and I have the personal experience, is that for 3 months, the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs was cyber attacked. And within 2 days, I had the resourcefulness of Minister Bacchus in a whole of government approach and the director of the ministry's ICT, Mr. Roger Seeley, drill down into a very serious cyber attack on the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, and we were back in business in less than 3 months. Now that's good news, so you don't hear it being heralded as something unfortunate that has happened to Trinidad and Tobago, but that is because of the whole of government approach that Minister Bacchus brings to his operations when he applies the tenacity, the skill, and the resolve of his ministry, applying the whole of government approach, so that I have been a student of Minister Bacchus's wisdom, understanding today better than I did 6 months ago the dire consequences of a cyber attack. And that is why I was able to speak today in my opening remarks about the quality of the work that is being done in the Registrar General's Department now, with the able, active, collaborative support and leadership of Minister Bacchus, Minister of Digital Transformation, working hand in hand with the Ministry of the Attorney General. And that is what we are about today. And I pay tribute to him. So let me turn, Mr. President, to dwell on some of the remarks of colleagues in this chamber. Senator Lachmidial spoke to security. She spoke to transitioning from a paper system to an electronic system. She spoke about access to services and authentication of the electronic signatures via the proclamation of the Electronic Transactions Act. She paid some credit to the fact that the initiative of this government is to be given some credit, but she reserved her considerable advocacy skills for criticism. Mr. President, in rolling out the cross system, there has been a relatively smooth transition period, and I am not going to repeat it. I've said it in my opening, and I've said it already this afternoon in the winding up. We migrated from the older system of TT BizLink, and we have had in-house registration hubs available at the Registrar General's Department with staff on hand who continue to be able and willing to provide useful guidance. So this is not a question of the public being at a loss and having no help. There have been throughout computer systems available and an online help desk to seek for persons to seek guidance and to resolve issues. Many users of the cross system can receive ICT support and technical assistance from the company's registry. In relation to the criticism of Senator Lachmidial as it relates to the number of penalties for tampering with data, she thought that the penalties were too small. Well, I found it intriguing that when she was followed by her colleague, Senator John wanted harsher penalties, and I wondered for a moment whether they were speaking from the same bench. But I want to place on record, Mr. President, that the penalties that are being promoted in the bill before this House today, the penalties are consistent with the provisions in the Customs Act in relation to the operation of the automated systems for custom data, ASICUDA, and with the existing penalties within the Companies Act. And the point there being that we are opting to be proportionate in our approach to introducing penalties and not to introduce penalties that are out of sync and therefore disproportionate with the precedents that already exist. If the time comes when we will have to regroup and look at it again, then we will. But at the moment, we wish to be proportionate as a responsible government is with respect for constitutional rights and fairness. And therefore, we have taken our cue from the existing from the existing legislation. The credit cards that Senator Dialsingh spoke about being utilized to top up accounts, well, I've touched on that already. The Registrar General's Department does not store credit card and Visa debit card information. Users of the cross system are able to top up at the offices of the Registrar General by using cash, checks, or links. And the Registrar General's payment portal framework is at industry standard, 3D Secure version 2.0. And in relation to the authentication of the electronic signatures, Mr. President, the e-signature used in cross, which is issued by the Registrar General, falls within the proclaimed sections of the Electronic Transactions Act. So it is, again, within the lawful framework of our existing legal infrastructure. Senator Vera, the Honourable Senator Vera, and I thank him for his contributions. I acknowledge the benefits which he very clearly articulated as the government continues to make progress on its digital transformation journey. This is just another stepping stone as the leading Caribbean nation to have the first paperless registry, allowing for greater transparency and accountability, efficiency, improved accuracy, enhanced security, and better access to all stakeholders. Mr. President, with respect to the inclusivity of individuals, the Registrar General's Department has continued to put measures in place, including, and I have mentioned it already, the development of in-house videos to provide guidance. And as the learned Senator Vera raised the point, let me just emphasize with emerging trends of blockchain, artificial intelligence, and other technologies, we continue to ensure that we remain consistent and build out our technology in the development of the infrastructure of our registries. These technological advances in recent years, Mr. President, allow national authorities and financial institutions to analyze large amounts of structured and unstructured data more efficiently, identifying patterns and trends more efficiently and effectively. Data pooling and collaborative analytics can help governments better understand, assess, and mitigate money laundering and terrorist financing risks. It will make it easier, more dynamic, effective, and efficient to identify these activities. It can reduce the number of false positives, enabling the private sector to comply in a timelier and less burdensome matter, including the domestic and international private sector wishing to do business with Trinidad and Tobago, safe and secure. And I emphasize again the points that were made by Senator Hasselbachers, Minister of Digital Transformation, that we have an ongoing cyber security strategy to ensure as we build out cross, it is going to be as secure as we can possibly make it, because in the interoperability of the whole of government approach, we have the technicians in Trinidad and Tobago from Estonia working with our technical people, working with our users of our systems to ensure that we not only build an open source technological cyber secure system, but that we own it, and not own it just in terms of paying for it, but that we own it because we learn to grow with it and we make it our own. And that is the best and most secure cyber security system that one can possibly wish to implement on a national basis. Senator Jerlene John spoke of security protocols. Well, I think I've said enough on that, and I don't want to pound the desk anymore with Senator Bacchus's name, so I think that the contributions of Senator Bacchus have addressed the concerns that Senator John would have belabored in her insecurities about cybersecurity. The proposed Section 9A is not a blanket immunity. This was a criticism of Senator John. That is the section, the proposed section that allows a degree of immunity to the staff of the Registrar General's Department in operationalizing CROSS. And may I, on this point, acknowledge and pay tribute to Senator Timal. I appreciate his concerns as well. But the reality is that we are not given a wide path to irresponsibility when one looks at the language of the proposed Section 9A. It speaks of the good faith performance and good faith discharge, and any member of the staff who is not going to operate the system in good faith will face the brunt of the law. The common law has evolved over centuries to deal with an irresponsible approach to the discharge of statutory duties. So good faith is in the section deliberately in order to put a rational, measured measure on the quality of immunity that will be given to the staff who are hardworking and are deserving to being able to work without the stress of having someone look over their shoulder every other day, because the job that we are asking of them is new, it is novel, it is being built out as we speak, and it carries its own level of responsibility and stress, and we want our staff working knowing that as a responsible government, we have their back and we encourage them to discharge their responsibilities responsibly. Senator Thompson Ahi made comments on the fines, and again, I make the point that I made earlier in relation to one of our other colleagues. The fact is that the existing penalties are drawn, the proposed penalties are drawn from existing legislation, and our approach is to take a proportionate approach to the penalties that will be visited for offenses and other occasions of non-compliance with the legislation. There's a point that, and I am sure that on reflection, Senator Ahi will agree with me, a point that I wish to part company with her on. She referred to issues arising in the probate registry. Well, the probate registry doesn't fall under the remit of the Registrar General's Department. The probate registry falls under the remit of the judiciary. So the Registrar General is not attempting to assume responsibility for the judiciary, nor for the probate registry, and CROSS, therefore, doesn't transgress into that area. Mr. President, Senator Gopi Singh made some comments which I am pained to have to describe as misinformed. He allowed himself to say we are one of 16 countries blacklisted by the EU. Trinidad and Tobago is blacklisted and continues to be blacklisted. Why has the government been sloppy? It is poor and inexcusable. I took the trouble to write it down because I was struck by with respect, the irresponsibility of that statement. Mr. President, if the senator had taken the time to do his homework, he would have advised himself that as of February 2020, the Financial Action Task Force removed Trinidad and Tobago from its grey list and concluded that Trinidad and Tobago is no longer subject to active monitoring. And in point of fact, in January 2015, Trinidad and Tobago, and I repeat the date, in January 2015, Trinidad and Tobago was the first member of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force to undergo the Financial Action Task Force fourth round mutual evaluation peer review process as a result of outstanding technical deficiencies existing In January 2015, the country had failed miserably in its assessment of regulatory laws and measures, and the then United National Congress government had taken no steps to inform the public of this assessment, nor of the dismal effect of failing the Financial Action Task Force process. By September the 7th, 2015, the People's National Movement government, led by the Honourable Prime Minister Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, met this devastating failure handed down from the former administration, and the results of that 2015 microscopic examination were a fait accompli. The mutual evaluation report published in June 2016, which Senator Gopi Singh is quoting from, highlighted the poor state of the country's AML CFT unsatisfactory and deficient structure in place during the United National Congress's administration. We rescued the country from that. And it was this government, led by Dr. Rowley, Honourable Prime Minister, driven by its anti-crime plan to take the profit out of crime and determined to improve Trinidad and Tobago's rating on the international front, led by the then Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, which piloted and implemented several measures to ensure transparency in land, cash, and business transactions to directly target the then existing rampant corruption, fraud, and criminality in the country. The government's plan to aggressively improve plant and machinery, process, people, and laws relative to the criminal justice system resulted in this government's enactment of 23 pieces of AML CFT legislation, and over the past 4 years, the United National Congress has done nothing to support and has caused unnecessary delays with regard to the progression of those pieces of legislation. I could continue, Mr. President, but I think the point has been understood, and I think my point has been made. This House must be assured, Mr. President, that in light of the various cyber attacks on various institutions, one being our own Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Registrar General's Department has taken and has put in place a number of preventative measures, of which CROSS is part, and we ask this House to join with us in passing the legislation today to ensure that we put forward a robust electronic system, a system with robust international anti-money laundering standards in relation to beneficial ownership and direct control of corporations where the owners would previously have hidden behind the corporate veil. Mr. President, some of the important contributions made by Senator Timal have been taken into consideration, and I give him the assurance that even if we may not address them immediately here today, I have made a note of most of them, and we will be giving it further consideration as we continue to improve our legislation. I assure him that the post of Senior Assistant Registrar General, it is not that this legislation has not created this as a new post. It is a post that has been in existence for quite a long period of time under the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. This amendment is simply to include it within the Registrar General's Act, simply to formalize it as a post that has been in operation since the early 2000s. With respect to the unique identifier, this is in keeping with the international standards for corporate registries. Our company's registries lead in the region. It is worth mentioning that it is now the international standard for all corporate registries to have facial recognition. The United Kingdom has passed an act requiring extensive identity verification for all company officials in the Economic Crime and Transparency Act 2023. New Zealand also utilizes a national electronic identifying mechanism called REALME for use across government services. This is necessary to ensure that there is transparency and accuracy of information of company officials. I've addressed the point raised by Senator Timal earlier about immunity when he asked the question, and a telling question, whether nobody will be held accountable. And I don't need to repeat the point that I made earlier. Persons will be held accountable if they fail to act in good faith in the discharge of their responsibilities under this legislation. I would like to assure this House, Mr. President, that the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs, under my leadership, will make it the utmost priority to ensure that there is a seamless operationalization of this very critical piece of legislation. The ministry will continue its efforts to collaborate and engage with the public and private sector, hold out a helping hand to engage the process and to work with all stakeholders for a smooth transitioning of the law. Mr. President, I beg to move.